The Baltimore Ravens have been linked to Cam Akers, the Los Angeles Rams running back. We talk about if it will be worth it for the Ravens to acquire Akers and what it will mean for the team, if so, coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. We are back. Another episode of Locked On Ravens here, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostraker of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen each and every day. Free and available as always, all podcasts and platforms, including in video form on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, follow along anywhere you're listening, audio form or video form. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. We are back, a midweek edition episode here with me today to break down some running back rumors. At least the rumors at this point, no trade has been made. Is Jake Louque of Exit 52, the jumbo set, coming back for another episode. Jake, the Ravens are 2-0. They're on top of the AFC North, and Baltimore is a city. I mean, it's going up right now as the Orioles are doing well. The Ravens, they're undefeated. Baltimore's a sports city.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And I mean, I'm just in a good mood here. Not to put you on blast. You can feel free to cut this out if you want to, but I'm always very, very tickled by like how you prepare for these things. You do kind of like the Ron Burgundy, like you get your voice ready, like the Baltimore Ravens, unique New York, like that kind of thing. So I just, that always gets me in a good mood on top of all the good vibes that we got going on here in the city right now. It's fantastic.
Well, I'll give you and everybody a production thing for me, at least. My microphone gets really, really loud at the beginning of recordings. So whenever I just go straight in to an intro, it's like 100 times louder. So I have to.
You got to turn the engine over a little bit. You got to, yeah.
It's like I'm really excited, and the microphone's like, all right, he's really excited. So let's just make it really loud. So for the viewers and the listeners' ear pleasure, I would say I don't want to just absolutely come in 2,000% volume, but I know in the actual production thing, I have to edit all that out. So a little production secret there, but it's interesting, Jake, because the Ravens, they've gone through injuries over the past couple of seasons that has not changed this year, unfortunately, so far. Plenty of injuries, especially at the running back position where J.K. Dobbins is already done for the year with an Achilles injury. Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, I guess Melvin Gordon, if you want to throw him in there, and Keaton Mitchell, who's on IR, as the Ravens running back room. But there have been some rumblings, should the Ravens trade for Jonathan Taylor, and should they make a move for him? But Cam Akers of the Los Angeles Rams, Jake, has been the latest name to be thrown into the ring here. Jordan Schultz reporting that the Ravens have been one of the teams to call the Rams about Akers. Now, calling and being interested in how much interest there is, I think there are a couple of different levels to it. Akers is someone that over the course of his career, since coming into the league in 2020, he's had a pretty up and down career. Had a really great rookie season with the Rams in 2020, but tore the Achilles in 2021. Came back and might have been record speed from that injury to help the Rams win the Super Bowl. 2022 was kind of up and down where the Rams were kind of looking to trade him then. And now 2023, he had one game, 22 carries for 29 yards, which is a pretty abysmal yards per carry. I mean, do you think the Ravens should be in the running back market right now, Jake, especially for a guy like Akers, or do you feel like you're fine with Edwards, Hill, and maybe Mitchell when he comes back?
Yeah, no, I'm certainly fine with the group that they have, especially with the way that they looked on Sunday. Maybe if it had been a little bit more resembling what we saw in week one, maybe, but I thought even in that game, they looked fine. And I mean, I just wouldn't be in any sort of rush to go and acquire a guy right now. But when you do talk about a guy like Akers, whose stock seems to be at a pretty much an all-time low for him right now, other than when he suffered that injury, of course, and then, I mean, he came back from that super quick relatively. So I don't know. He's a guy that's, I think, pretty intriguing at this stage. To your point, I would be surprised if they hadn't at least called, but as far as concrete interest goes, I think they were probably just gauging the market right now. I don't think they're in any kind of hurry. And then it sounds like they've got Kenyan Drake coming in here for a visit, who they already know. Obviously, he didn't play in the Monken offense, but maybe it's something that he could pick up quickly enough. And we'll certainly see what happens. But like I said, man, I'm pretty satisfied with what we've seen out of these top two guys as far as Hill and Gus Edwards go. And then Keaton Mitchell, like you mentioned, is still very much in the mix. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and the Drake thing is interesting because I don't know what they would do with that. Like, I think Drake was fine last year for them. The Giants game? We just ran all over him. That was like Kenyan Drake's Ravens coming out party. But would that be a practice squad signing, do you think, if it did happen, and then maybe Melvin Gordon is the one who gets cut?
Probably. I mean, it sounds like they were already kind of considering bringing Gordon up and everything. I just, it seems like for some reason, and I think Spenny, my co-host, has made this point that they just kind of like love Gordon for some reason. Maybe it's like a John Harbaugh thing where he watched him in the Big Ten just destroy Michigan, and now he just has this kind of, some kind of thing for him. But yeah, if I had to choose between the three guys, I mean, Kenyan Drake and Cam Akers would both be above Melvin Gordon as far as my preferences. We'll see what happens, but it does seem like they kind of do like Gordon a little bit. And then, they have familiarity with Drake there. So yeah, maybe they do just kind of bring him to the practice squad, slowly ease him in. They're not in any rush, nor should they be. They're 2-0. They've got a opponent coming up who I think they should take care of pretty easily this week with the Colts. And then, you just kind of see where you're at. But like I said, I think they're pretty much fine with where they are right now. Maybe there's going to be injuries moving forward. Edwards has obviously had his issues in the past that he's really still coming back from. So it's just something that there's got to be constant churn, constant monitoring of that type of situation. And I'm really not expecting much to happen. Maybe they bring Drake into the practice squad, to your point. But as far as some kind of big trade, whether it even be for an Akers or a Taylor in the more pie in the sky type mold, I'm not really expecting much.
A point that Spencer made last week with me, Jake, is that the Ravens, when they should be looking for trades or acquisitions or whatnot, it's not that you should be looking based off just one injury that happened. It should be, well, what would happen if another guy went down? So let's say that Gus Edwards has to miss some time and the Ravens don't make the move for Akers. Would you feel comfortable with, Justice Hill and Melvin Gordon? And if it's Kenyan Drake or Keaton Mitchell, would that be a room you're okay with? Or would you say, all right, now something might have to happen?
Yeah, no, I probably at that point would start to raise the alarm bells a little bit. And yeah, I guess we would have to see what happens. And maybe they would be kind of out of luck as far as timing goes, because maybe somebody else acquires Akers. I know there's teams that are probably a bit more seriously interested in him than Baltimore is as of this point. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where you just got to approach it as each week comes. And I don't know, for right now, it feels like they look good. So, you don't necessarily want to be a prisoner of the moment, especially with the way that Edwards' knee injury kind of affected him pretty badly and is really still dealing with degenerative stuff on it. That's certainly tough, and it's something to monitor, like I said, but I don't know. I wouldn't bend over backwards for it. I'm not one of these running backs don't matter guys, but I just feel like it's something you can kind of manufacture a little bit, especially when you have a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who makes up for a lot of stuff in the running game.
Ken, you mentioned that Akers, it seems like his stock is pretty much all the way down. I thought it was down last year. I think it got lower than what it was last year now, especially with the game that he had in week 1. I mean, if the Ravens throw a conditional 7th or a conditional 6th in there for Cam Akers, you're like, all right, it's whatever. Would you rather save that capital for a potential corner move at the deadline, or do you not think those late picks even matter that much anyway?
Probably not. I mean, if you're making a move for a big guy, then it probably would have to be a higher pick anyway. And obviously you can throw those, later picks in as sweeteners, but I mean, if a team is making that the difference between acquiring a guy and not, I just don't really see a scenario where that's going to happen. And maybe you can do a player for player thing, or what they did with Marcus Peters, where, you send Kenny Young in a 5th round pick. So you send one of these players that maybe you don't need. They have depth at certain positions like that. So maybe that could be the sweetener. You don't have to worry about having a 6th or a 7th round conditional pick. So who knows?
Yeah, no, the Rams were the team that took that Kenny Young in a 5th round pick for Marcus Peters.
The Rams are all of a sudden, they value draft picks again. So we'll have to see what happens with that.
Yeah.
They have a 1st round pick for the first time in 50 years.
Were they going to they were going to trade 2 firsts for, who was it last year? Was it Brian Burns?
Brian Burns, I think, right?
Yeah. God, can you imagine if they did that? Oh man. So hopefully they'll be able to get their draft chest back, but they still are they won the Super Bowl, but again, if they didn't, it would have been an absolute disaster based off how many picks they gave up, because man, it was a lot to go out there and get a rental in Von Miller, Matthew Stafford, and all those guys. But let's talk a bit about, Jake, before we head into our first break, your opinion on the running back room so far right now through 2 weeks. Gus Edwards, I thought looked pretty good. I mean, average 6.2 yards per carry in week 2. Justice Hill's not had the best yards per carry average through 2 weeks, but I still think that he has explosiveness and has deceptive power. How have you thought the running backs have looked through 2 weeks so far?
They've just looked really solid, like just kind of pretty much exactly what you need. I think, like you said, nothing's wowing you. Nothing is jumping off the screen. Edwards kind of just looks like a little bit of a souped down, I guess you would say, version of what we've seen from Gus Edwards when he's at his peak. Probably 2020 is what I would say that would be. Doesn't quite look like that. He doesn't look quite as explosive, but I don't know, like he's still kind of just that hammer in the short areas. Like, and he was this even to an extent last year in some big moments. So, I mean, you saw it against Cincinnati. closing the game out the way they did. They give him the game ball, which was great to see. And a couple nice runs when he got into the open field too. He broke one that got them into Cincinnati territory at one point. So he looked solid. And then Hill, looking pretty good as well, looking powerful, more powerful than I think he gets credit for. A lot of people credit him as just kind of this finesse back, this sort of scat back type player. He's much more than that to me. He has power, he has cutting ability and vision, and then also getting him involved in the passing game I liked. That little screen pass where Lamar kind of dodged one of the Bengals defenders, and he just sort of goosed it to him, and he gained a couple yards on what would have been a dead play. So liking the versatility I'm seeing out of Hill, I'm liking the power that I'm seeing out of Gus, and they're both bringing a little bit more plus in the other areas too, which is good to see.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be okay at running back, and they honestly are. I think throughout the offseason, Jake, so many people talked about how, look, if the Ravens were to lose a running back, whether it would be Dobbins or Edwards or Hill, they would still be okay with two of the three guys. And obviously Dobbins is, I think, your best healthy running back when he's out there, but Edwards is no slouch. I think he's one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated running back in the entire league. I mean, he's averaged 5 yards a carry for his entire career. And this is his sixth season. He came with Lamar. So his sixth season. He's been great. And then Justice Hill, you mentioned, I think is much more than just a little scat back type guy, has power to him too. But coming up in the second part of the show, we'll get into the Ravens and Bengals wrap up as we wrap up, put a bow on the Ravens 27-24 win over the Bengals, get Jake's opinion on that. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to still on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors, and our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Benny Iyer to bring in some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to be providing you the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny's picked out for us in this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the week. And for the Chiefs, second and running back Isaiah Pacheco hasn't delivered too much to his fantasy football managers this season, but be sure to roll him out of the garage for plenty of production on the ground, cleaning up against the bad Bears overall defense that has been very bad overall there. And in week 3, Pacheco should break some chunk runs with an excellent shot to score to provide punctuation in a home blowout. Vinny Iyer of Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win the fantasy championship. eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your ride needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Those only issues as well. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Jake Louque. And Jake, let's wrap up a little bit. I haven't asked you about it yet. I want to get your opinions on what you saw in week 2. The Ravens go into Cincinnati. No J.K. Dobbins, no Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Williams, Ronnie Stanley, Tyler Linderbaum. They lose Odell midway through the game, and they pull out a win. The first half, Joe Burrow had 35 passing yards. I think the defense and Mike McDonald again stepped up, and Mike McDonald to me is Joe Burrow's kryptonite, and the Bengals offense kryptonite at this point. In your estimation and from what you saw, how'd the Ravens go in there and I don't want to say steal it. They took it from Cincinnati and won the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny that you bring up McDonald because it almost felt like the mutual parting of ways, whatever you want to call it, with Wink Martindale was almost a direct reaction to just getting firebombed by the Bengals in 2021 2 different times. And I mean, one of them was maybe a little bit more of a competitive game because they had Jackson in the lineup. And then the other one was just that was the Door Dashers at corner game, famously. That, like I said, I feel like that was a really big reason why Wink Martindale, who was kind of running his mouth a little bit heading into that game, and then Joe Burrow shut him up a little bit. I think that was part of the reason why the Ravens were like, all right, we're just done with this. We're going to, thanks for everything, Wink, but we're going to move on. We're going to go on to McDonald. And it's just, to your point, Joe Burrow's kryptonite. Everything he's done, a little bit more conservative, sitting back. I was watching the game with Spencer and Brian, my co-hosts, and, I'm not as much of an X's and O's guy as Spencer, certainly, but I was like, man, are they bracketing Chase or are they just doing something really smart here? Because he is not getting involved at all. I think he had the one target, or a couple targets, obviously, but he had the target down in the red zone that Rocky Sin broke that up. That was a really nice play. It just felt like they were doing everything they needed to do. And they said, hey, if you want to go ahead and beat us with T. Higgins, you can do that. But we're not going to let you beat us with number 1. And it was great to see. And then obviously there were some really good breakdowns from Spencer, from Mike Santagata, who covers the Bengals over on All Bengals, I think it is, in Sports Illustrated, breaking down that Geno Stone interception, which was equal parts a good call and a good read by Stone. Really nice to see. But I mean, man, the takeaway from the game, and maybe this is a little stock, but it's got to be Lamar Jackson. He looked, and some people have said this as well, and I probably agree with it, that he looked as in command, as calm as I've seen him in a long time. One of the best games that I've ever seen him start. And it was on the road in a very hostile environment with a fired up, pissed off fan base that were not happy about starting 0-1 going on the road there in Cleveland. They needed that win big time because they started out 0-2 now after this loss. And like I said, a big part of that was Lamar Jackson just very calm in the pocket, calm footwork, but he also, and maybe this is a credit to the offense too with Todd Monken, it didn't look like he sacrificed his playmaking ability because he had his moments where he just sat back in the pocket and he diced them up and he took a lot of stuff largely over the middle. It felt like the Bengals were kind of just giving that to him. And he was like, okay, you're giving it to me, then I'll take it. I'll take Nelson Aguilar 12 yards. I'll take Rashad Bateman here 7 yards. I'll take, whoever else it might be getting involved, Odell Beckham when he was still healthy. And then I think that set them up really well for that shot play to Zay Flowers, who converts that huge play that gets him down to the red zone where Mark Andrews scores. So it just felt very calm, very in control. And that was kind of the story of the game to me, is that Lamar Jackson looked as good as we've seen him. And it couldn't have come in a more opportune time because this is a tough schedule to start the season, I think, for the Ravens. And to get off to a 2-0 start there, very good stuff.
Yeah, I think when the full schedule comes out, you almost look at most important stretches. You identify like 5 or 6 weeks where it's like, all right, this is the stretch that could define the season. And honestly, I think, Jake, for the Ravens, it's this one already right here because it's the 3 AFC North games on the road. You're done by week 5. You go to London and play the Titans in week 6. The Ravens went in there, again, injuries galore, and they beat a Bengals team. Now, Joe Burrow re-aggravated the calf and everything, but again, the Ravens are dealing with like their stuff too. Injuries happen.
He looked better to me in the second half than he did in the first, when allegedly he was more injured. And I'm sure he is hurt a little bit, but a part of me thinks he's playing that up a touch.
So I don't know, I don't think we've heard anything at this point about what the Bengals plan to do with him and whatever the calf injury is. But I mean, he jumped over Justin Madubuike and he looked like kind of agile in a couple. He's slippery. I mean, he escaped and he looked okay, but I get that he's not 100%.
And I'm getting a lot of this like national media stuff now where everyone's like, oh, well, they just start slow every year. Well, it's like they did last year. I don't really know what happened the year before that, but yeah, like sure, they started slow last year, but you don't want to necessarily get yourself into the territory where you become the slow starting team and then you win 10 games in a row. At some point, that's going to run out. And that was part of the reason why I picked the Ravens. And it wasn't by much. I only had them winning the division by one more game than them. And I think it might have even been a tiebreaker. But eventually, it's hard to win a division 3 years in a row, much less the AFC North, where it's never been done. So eventually their grip was going to, come a little bit looser. And, obviously they have plenty of time to turn around, plenty of football left. But it's just kind of the natural order of things. So we'll see what happens with them. But I don't know. I think some people are kind of just writing off an 0-2 start as if it's nothing. I'd be a little worried if I was a Bengals fan right now.
Yeah, I think the stat of Zach Taylor, as the Bengals head coach, is either 1-7 or 1-9 in the first 2 weeks of the season since he's taken over there. So they've been that slow starting team, but they're 0-2 not only in their record, but the division. They're 0-2 in the division right now too. And I think in an AFC conference, only the Ravens and the Dolphins are the 2 undefeated teams right now, but it's going to be a really competitive conference. Every conference win, every divisional win, I think is going to go a little further this year. And the Bengals have a tough strength of schedule. I don't think it's that much different. I think the Ravens have the 17th easiest and the Bengals have the 21st easiest, but the Bengals have to play the Chiefs and the Bills and they have a first place schedule. The Ravens have a second place schedule and we'll see how that all goes. But you mentioned Lamar, Jake, and I think I agree with you in terms of he looked calm. The pocket was great. The offensive line stepped up with Sam Mustipher and Patrick McCary playing really, really well. But I think Lamar is starting to settle in. It's only been 2 weeks, but I think we saw a little rust in the first half of week 1 against Houston. They come out, Todd Monken makes the adjustments. It's still a feeling out process. I think the expectations that some people had for the offense to start the year were too high in the offseason to say, well, they're just going to click immediately. They have the weapons. They have the new offense. It was always going to be a process, but I was encouraged at least, Jake, by at least seeing Lamar look comfortable, look calm in this new offense under Todd Monken.
Yeah, sure. And to your point, it's not going to look like that every week. There's going to be weeks where he's off. There's going to be weeks where, maybe he's sick or something like that, because we know that can happen with him. So, there's going to be ups and downs with it, but this certainly was a very nice spot to have one of those up games. Like I said, when you're on the road in a hostile environment against a presumed division favorite, it's a really good place to settle in and have one of your best games of the season. And hopefully he has many more like that. But yeah, man, it was very, very encouraging. And I think it was needed a little bit after that week 1 game where we were talking about undercooked appetizers and things of that nature. It was good to go out there and kind of just immediately quell all those narratives, because if they had 1, 2, 3 more games like that, things could have gotten ugly. And I think they earned themselves a little bit of a cushion here as far as the evaluation of this offense goes, because we've had one that was kind of middling, I thought generally impressive in some spots, but could have been way better. And now one that was like pretty much optimal, like all we've been asking for. And it helped that all their talent was out there, man. I mean, sans J.K. Dobbins, who's obviously not going to be there for the remainder of the year, but you get Mark Andrews out there. Odell Beckham in the first half looked very good. This is pretty much exactly what you wanted to see. There's no other way to put it. And like I said, it's not always going to look like that, but that's a very encouraging sign.
And I don't think the Ravens win this game without their depth. I mean, seemingly everybody that stepped in for somebody injured played really well or had a play. Geno Stone for Marcus Williams, Rock Ya-Sin, who you mentioned, and Ronald Darby, and the Brandon Stevens even for Marlon Humphrey, obviously McCarry and Mustipher for Linderbaum and Stanley, and Odell Beckham goes down. You get Nelson Aguilar. Devin Duvernay got really involved in this one too. Zay Flowers doing Zay Flowers things throughout this one too. And then running back wise, we talked about it with Gus and Justice Hill. I just feel a lot better, Jake, this year about the Ravens' depth. Like last year, there were a couple of positions, I think wide receiver being the main one, where I was just like, it's going to be Bateman might go down. And if he goes down, it's just absolute disaster. But Beckham goes down and you have 4 other guys that can step up. And that's just what it is at most, not every position, but most positions for the Ravens this year.
You got to look at the coaching staff too, man. I mean, like Keith Williams has been working with these guys for a couple years now. And some of these young receivers, Bateman looking good. Certainly Flowers only been in there for one off season, but he's, I think, looked like their best receiver. And you got to give credit to those guys. And Jody Alessandros, man, I mean, Patrick McCarry at left tackle, Sam Mustipher at center. John Simpson was a cast-off. He's starting at left guard. I mean, Zeitler and Moses look good, obviously, but, from center to left tackle, like, you're talking about some pretty big uncertainties, and they're just going out there and handling their business. And I think there was an element of Lou Anarumo mush rushing and saying, okay, Lamar Jackson, sit back in the pocket and beat us, and that backfired on him. But also, those guys held up pretty well, and you really got to give credit to the coaching staff as well as their performance, too. So.
Yeah, and I've liked how the Ravens have assembled their coaching staffs for a long time, but I think it's not too many like young up and coming coaches and not too many like veteran coaches who have been there for a while. It's been a great mix of guys. And I think that, even the shifts that they made, moving T. Martin over from wide receiver to quarterbacks coach and bringing in a guy like Greg Lewis to coach the wide receivers. I think the players have great positional coaches, and I think the coaches are doing a great job. So I definitely agree with that. And I think we see the John Harbaugh being fired up and pushing Justice Hill. And, John Harbaugh's a strong dude. Like, you see, he works out a little bit. You can tell, Steve Saunders in the tell-all told us he did, and he tortured him apparently. So there's that. Yeah, no, that was quite a visual. That there's just few people in the NFL that fascinate me and like bring me more joy than John Harbaugh. And when he's and it's funny because like early in the game, like Brian actually called this. Brian and I noticed it at the same time. Really, like early in the game, he was doing his thing with the hands on the knees and the head down, and it's like, oh God, is this going to be one of those kind of games? But maybe that's just a sign of him being locked in because they go out there and they handle their business. And at the end of the game, he lets all that joy out. He's doing the double fist pumps, and he's pushing Keith Williams and like getting all fired up with his guys. So yeah, it was great to see. The shift, I think, in John Harbaugh from what he was early on in his coaching career to who he is now has been such a transformation to me. It has, man. And that's what happens when a guy hangs around for 15 years, really going on 20 almost at this point. So, I mean, that was stupid. It's 15. But like, was it you that tweeted, was it you or Ramey or somebody tweeted like the emotional ride that he went through in 2021? That was me, yeah. Yeah, the picture of him on the Lions game and then like whatever. Like it's so fun. Like he really wears his heart on his sleeve in a way that his brother kind of does too. It's just very authentic and very genuine, and it's, if nothing else, it's very entertaining. Yeah, I think coaches have those like memeable moments, but John Harbaugh has just like, I love the facial expressions that he gives us, and like you can tell when. Like he does, he wears his heart on his sleeve, as you said, and you can tell the emotion he's going through. And I think it's very in line with the fan base, mostly. Not every single time, but mostly it is, which I think Harbaugh is, again, a great fit for them, and we'll see how he can lead this team this season. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll be diving into some roster moves, a surprising one that happened yesterday. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot still to get to on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. And if you're looking for daily fantasy sports, look no further than PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most fun that many have had, winning up to 25 times their money this football season. All you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less than their projected stats, and place your entry. And they have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So this week on PrizePicks, maybe you could select Justin Jefferson going for more than his projected euro total. Lamar Jackson going for more than his projected touchdown total. Maybe Odell Beckham Jr. if he plays, you can pick for more than his total yard total. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. And PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. We're back rounding out Locked On Ravens here. Kevin Oestreicher with Jake Louque still. And Jake, we got a little bit of a shock. The last week of injuries. I mean, Odafe Oweh leaves the game. Don't really know what happens. The Ravens don't put out an update. I'm seeing a lot of Tavius Robinson in there. And then John Harbaugh reveals after the game it was, I think, an ankle thing. But the Ravens on Tuesday put Ardarius Washington on injured reserve with a chest injury. They promote Sam Mustipher to the active roster. This one really came out of nowhere for me. I know that, Washington was matched up with T. Higgins. That's not a very favorable matchup for Ardarius Washington, considering the size difference. But I thought he played overall really well in the preseason. Had a really great game in week 1. Obviously, week 2 was not the best because of the matchup. But I guess the Ravens have to put Arthur Millette in the slot now until Marlon Humphrey comes back. Once Humphrey comes back, it gives them more options. I think also with the way that Stevens and Rock Ya-Sin and Ronald Darby have played. But I don't know. It was just shocking because I think, usually we get all these updates, but Washington seemingly came out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, DB depth is also it's still a little rickety. I mean, to your point, these guys are playing, punching above their weight, certainly, but it felt like they could use all the guys they could get. And Washington, I thought, had played well through the first 2 games. So, yeah, it's tough to see. I mean, you and I speculated before we got going here. Is it kind of just a little bit of a phantom injury, get him to the IR, clear some space for a running back move? So we'll see what happens. But, yeah, I think it is unfortunate, especially for an ascending young player who they've kind of had bounce around a little bit. And, you want him to turn into something similar to what we saw with Geno Stone. So, yeah, man, it's one of those things where, I don't know, hopefully it's not the end of the road for him, because I really thought he was kind of developing into a promising kind of diamond in the rough type piece for them back there.
And he earned that slot corner job in the preseason. I think that there were some concerns after the Ravens cut Caillou Kelly and they kept Arthur Millette. And they're saying, well, are they just going to give the slot job to Millette, even though he didn't pretty much practice all offseason with a shoulder thing? I guess until Humphrey comes back, you do put Millette in the slot. But would you feel more comfortable, Jake, once Humphrey came back, I guess, inserting him into the slot and using Ya-Sin and all the other outside guys? I think Marlon's better on the outside, but he can play slot at an elite level like we saw him do. What was it, 2020 or 2021? He had to do that for a full season pretty much. Where would you kind of shift the Ravens corners now that Washington is out once everybody gets healthy?
I feel like Darby profiles pretty well for the slot. I don't know how much they've been throwing him in there, but he's just kind of a guy that it feels like he's been living around the line of scrimmage and just kind of making these junkyard dog type plays that have covered up for some of the issues that he's had in coverage at times. So maybe you just do that. You move Darby there and you have Marlon go to the outside, but I don't know, could be a case by case basis thing. I know there was a stretch of time where they wouldn't shade, top wide receivers with him. They would kind of just stick him on one side and stick with that. Maybe that would be the hallmark of the McDonald defense. But yeah, I mean, whatever gets it done to win, I think just kind of having that flubber mentality, being versatile, is going to be crucial for them. And I'm sure Marlon would be willing. And maybe it would even be easier to put him in the slot coming off of an injury like that. Who knows? So we'll see what happens. But it feels like they do have some options, which I wouldn't have thought that they would have even have before the season started, because it felt like it was just Humphrey and Ya-Sin were the only 2 guys that were really proven, and the rest were kind of just going to be, depth pieces that hopefully were going to be something. But all these guys have, staked a claim to be out there on the field, and that's an encouraging sign.
And I think part of it too has been the safeties have been really good. And so for the Ravens, who, again, the corners, sometimes they don't have great reps. The pass rush doesn't get there. And, the quarterback's sitting there for 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds, however much. Geno Stone has played great. Marcus Williams played, I thought, decently well. He only played for a short time in week 1, but Stone and Kyle Hamilton's been incredible. He's been great to me. I think that the safeties are kind of masking for some of the weaknesses the corners do have. What about when Williams comes back, though? Jake, do you think Geno has kind of established himself as a player that's going to have more of a full-time role in the defense? How do you kind of get Geno Stone on the field once Marcus Williams comes back?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you just gotta pick your spots, because Williams, I think, very much should be the guy there no matter what. It feels like whenever he's on the field, he makes a big impact, not just in taking stuff away in coverage, but the guy just gets his freaking hands on the ball every time he's on the field. Like, you really got to give him credit for it. He's just got a nose for that. And maybe a similar way to Geno. I mean, we've seen him. He picked off Tom Brady, kind of baited him last year in that Tampa Bay game, and then this year obviously comes in and really makes the game-changing play against Joe Burrow. That's huge. So hopefully he keeps it up. I mean, if we're talking about this in a couple weeks, I'll consider that a very big problem to have. I'm not necessarily expecting it, but I think he'll still be a solid player, and you'll find a way to work him into the rotation. And, with Williams coming back from a pec injury, those things can be tough. So maybe it will be a little bit more of a rotation than we realize.
Yeah, and I think it's a good problem to have at the end of the day. You'd rather have 3 safeties, or I guess 2 at the free safety position that you feel really confident in, as opposed to one guy, and then you're like, all right, well, who's going to be the guy to fill in? Geno's done it. He had to do it last year. For when Williams was out last year, he stepped up and played really well. I think, again, that you mentioned it's essentially was a 14-point swing that he had in that Bengals game. The Bengals, if he didn't come over, that was a pretty much sure touchdown almost every single time. Geno comes over, makes that play. I think, what was it? The next play was that Lamar bomb to Zay Flowers. So the fact that he didn't cut it back inside gave us the highlight, I guess. But I know he put it out on Twitter. And I know the run back from Stone was a little bit, it was, I don't know, wasn't as clear as the broadcast made it seem, because it seemed like there were more Bengals up the field on the all-22 than the broadcast showed.
Yeah, and I'm just in there breaking down the all-22 relentlessly, so I definitely agree with that. But no, he's got to be happy that they scored a touchdown there, because at the very least he probably could have cut it back and gotten it into Bengal territory before he got caught. But all's well that ends well. So
yep. The Ravens offense, they picked him up. Geno got on the ball. The Ravens offense did the rest. But we also know, with Odell and Adebayo, Jake, John Harbaugh saying that both, shouldn't be serious, but they're not going to give timelines right now. I don't know. The Owe thing is a little less clear to me, because I don't know if we're ever going to get a John Harbaugh timeline again after what happened last year with Lamar Jackson and just how everything went. John Harbaugh's keeping it close to the vest this year, and I don't know if that's going to change or not.
Yeah, we've been saying that since 2015 with Rashad Perriman. I mean, that was really the first one that I can remember being super egregious. And then it's like, oh, we'll just never get one again. And then guess what happens? 2 years in a row with Lamar Jackson, that very thing occurs. So, and it's like, what is he supposed to do? Like, I really don't get it. So yeah, he's probably better off just keeping his mouth shut. And I know there will be a select group of people that'll get mad at that, but you kind of just got to pick your poison if you're him. And that's the one that I would choose. And
I know that with the injured reserve now being 4 weeks in your back, well, at least minimum of 4 weeks in your back, the fact that Marcus Williams is not going on IR, not having the surgery, they didn't put Linderbaum on there, didn't put Stanley on there. Does that make you feel like, okay, the Ravens are feeling pretty confident that those guys can come back before that 4-week threshold? And again, we're not doctors, unless you want to put on that stethoscope, Jake, and be a doctor here. But I would at least assume that if the Ravens felt like it'd be more long-term than 4 or 5 weeks, they definitely put them on IR. Is there kind of a chess game that goes into that, or what are you feeling?
Yeah, I think it would. And I think they like the guys that they have right now. And if they want to sacrifice a couple spots to just, roster these guys, they're probably willing to do it, even if it is like 5 to 6 weeks, because like I said, they earned themselves some breathing room here. 2-0, starting out with a tough win on the road against a divisional opponent. And then, like I said, a little bit of a softer game next week. Going to get a little bit harder after that, certainly, but you can get yourself to your bye and just kind of, hope that these guys will be back. If not by then a little bit around that time. You're in a good spot. So yeah, I would say just keep doing what you're doing and see if you can figure it out, because certainly the depth that they have held up very well for them, not just this week, but the week before too. So
do you feel like in the North, the Ravens, it's their division to lose? Not that like, oh, they're the favorites and they're 99% going to win, but they're 2-0 right now, 1-0 in the division. The Bengals are 0-2. Deshaun Watson has looked horrendous for Cleveland through 2 games. Kenny Pickett has looked somehow worse through 2 games for the Steelers. The Browns defense is legit. The Steelers defense is also legit, but I feel like the Ravens have put themselves in a great position. And if they can win at least one of these next 2 divisional games, I feel like they're in a really, really good spot moving forward.
Yeah, I feel like they're the kind of the most complete right now. You could make the argument that Cincinnati has the most complete roster, but they're just not playing up to their talent. You mentioned the Burrow injury. That could be a lingering issue for them. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, the Browns, they're not doing much for me. And it's a real shame to see Deshaun Watson not living up to that contract. He was never going to, but he's not even close right now, not even on the planet of what they paid him. So I really hate seeing that happen. And then Kenny Pickett, I mean, I didn't really buy into all this Kenny Pickett mythology that was going on in the preseason. Like, he completed a couple nice passes. That was good to see for them, I guess. But it just felt like an uphill battle in AFC that is filled with aliens at quarterback, that Kenny Pickett, this nothing against the guy, but there's just like nothing about him that really like excites me. And, you know, he's got some grit and some grind to him, and maybe he could be this Derek Carr type player, this Andy Dalton type player, which would be good for them. But it just feels like you're a little bit behind the curve already athletically, and then it was going to be difficult. And then to your point, he's really not even piloting that offense, which, I mean, you've got Fire Matt Canada chance going on there at Acrisure Stadium last night. It just feels like they're in a tough spot right now offensively. And, you know, hopefully for them, they can turn around. But to your point, I mean, good defense. That'll keep them in games, certainly. And then same thing could probably be said for the Browns. But the vibes are just weird around the Browns right now, man. They lose Nick Chubb to season-ending knee injury. Shout out to Adam Schefter for getting way ahead of the story on that. And then you got just, you know, weird vibes with Deshaun Watson. He's pushing a ref. Like, what? I just don't know what's going on there, man. And I don't know. Some Browns follows that I follow on Twitter are just, you know, they're very displeased with the guy, and they think the vibes are weird around the guy right now. So we'll see what happens. And is it the Ravens division? Sure, right now it is, but, you know, long way to go. And like I said, they're probably, I would say, the most complete team, or at least playing like the most complete team. Long way to go, but that's a good sign.
Yeah, no, when you said it's a shame, I sensed just a little bit of sarcasm. Just a tiny, tiny bit of sarcasm.
You think that's a little laced in sarcasm there?
Just a tiny bit. But with the ref thing, after the game, he's like, "Oh, no, I didn't push the ref." And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's clearly there that you had 2 face mask penalties. It was one of the, like, it was terrible. I never liked the move for the Browns in the first place. They essentially sold their soul to get him, and he's not even playing, as you mentioned, nearly close to that fully guaranteed contract. And then the Pittsburgh defense literally won them the game. So,
and it also it also sucks to see Baker Mayfield playing so well too. And he's got the Buccaneers at 2-0. I mean, it's just like, what a twist of fate for, you know, people that, you know, I don't want to moral grandstand too much here or anything, but it's, it is delicious as a Ravens fan to see. Let's just say that.
Yeah, the division rivalries are great. But looking at the Colts game, Jake, I know it's a game that a lot of people, when you talk about the matchups the Ravens have throughout the season, probably one of the easier ones. Anthony Richardson has been, I think, a lot better than some people thought he would be to start his career. We don't know at this point if it's going to be Richardson or Gardner Minshew, because Richardson is in the concussion protocol. How are you feeling this week about the Colts game?
You know, it's funny. I think I actually had them winning that division at like 10-7, just because I thought Anthony Richardson was going to look exactly like he's looked, which is to say that he can run around, make some plays. You know, I think he scored multiple rushing touchdowns last week. They're getting him on the move. They're doing some young kind of Cam Newton stuff is the vibes I'm getting with him, and that's really cool to see. And then they've just got I think a pretty talented defense, especially on the front end there with Shaq Leonard and some of those guys. And offensive line is, I guess, is still solid, but, you know, weird stuff going on with Jonathan Taylor. And then, I don't know. I mean, Gardner Minshew, a pretty good backup. So it definitely changes their offense having Gardner Minshew out there, because, like I said, it felt like they were kind of just, you know, having the tank and Anthony Richardson out there sort of leading the troops into battle there the first couple weeks. And I thought he looked solid, but, you know, obviously they didn't quite play winning football through those first couple weeks. So it's going to be tough for them to come into a spot like Baltimore with a team playing this well, with the vibes this high, and certainly against a defense that has done really good and also punched above their weight as far as some of the talent they have on the back end there. So I'm expecting the Ravens to keep things rolling in this one. And, you know, we'll see what happens depending on who plays quarterback, but I don't think it would change my prediction very much.
Yeah, I'd expect it to be a win, you know, regardless of Richardson or Minshew in there. But the Colts, they've looked better than I thought they would so far through 2 weeks, but I think a lot of it's going to have to do with who's a quarterback for them in week 3. But Jake, I appreciate you hopping on. Thank you so much for giving me the Ravens insight here. Please tell people what you're working on and where they can find you.
Yeah, anytime, buddy. You can find us on the Exit 52 podcast that is on podcast platforms and YouTube as well if you want to watch. Got some content going up there recently as well. We're going to be trying to pump more out. It's our guy Spenny doing some film review content if you like that kind of stuff. So check out the Exit 52 podcast on YouTube. And yeah, man, we're just pumping out 3 episodes a week as far as Ravens go. And then if you're into Orioles, we've got bonus stuff coming in that regard as well. Probably at least 1 episode a week as they gear up for the playoffs here. So yeah, we're doing previews and reviews Fridays and Mondays generally. And then the jumbo set, which is a little bit more of a deep dive thing, drops on Tuesday. So as you're listening to this, that episode should be out right now on our feed, which, like I said, Exit 52 Podcast. You can also get after us on Twitter at Exit 52 Podcast, and I'm at Jake Louque, and that's spelled Louque.
Awesome. Yeah, they're pumping out the content over there at Exit 52. The links will be in the description below. Ravens, Orioles, Baltimore's buzzing right now sports-wise. It's a great time to be a Baltimore sports fan, 100%. But Jake, I appreciate you again. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, follow along in audio form as well, wherever you get your podcast. Coming up tomorrow, another crossover Thursday. Be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.